What's up, Starseeds? It's Sid, and today I'm going to be talking about the first majorly reported alien abduction story that happened on the night of September 19th, 1961, known as the Betty and Barney Hill incident. I am going to be going over 6 different YouTube videos on the subject, reading you guys my notes that I took on them, and telling you which ones I liked the most. Now, I love all 6 of these videos very much, but I do have some favorites, so if you look in the description of this video, they will be there, and all these pictures that you are seeing now, we are going to be talking about, and you will see them again at the end of the video. Like I said, we're going to go over 6 different YouTube videos on the Betty and Barney Hill case, so all of those videos as well as timestamps are going to be in the description of this video, and we are going to start this off with a video by This Morning called "An Alien Abducted My Family and I Can Prove It." So I really like this video because it's a clip off of the news on TV, but mainly because Kathleen Martin, Betty Hill's niece, is actually the one who is talking to these news reporters about this incident from her perspective of what her aunt and uncle have told her. So it's very accurate information if in terms of accuracy you're looking at the people who are actually telling the story. And Kathleen Martin has actually dedicated her life to UFO and abduction research, so she was very moved by this, to say the least. So we are going to get into what this video has to say and what Kathleen Martin had to say in this short video. It was less than 10 minutes long, so it doesn't have all the facts, but it has some key ones to start this video off, okay? So she says Betty was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire, Barney worked for the post office, and they had taken a vacation to Toronto, Canada, as well as Niagara Falls, and they were driving home through the White Mountains of New Hampshire late at night when this happened, okay? She described them as having a close encounter with a UFO approximately 100 feet from them. Barney got out of the car with his binoculars because they had just been sightseeing Niagara Falls and all that, and he wanted to look at what this was. They made a report to the National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomenon. They talked to the Air Force, and they said it was as large as a dinner plate at arm's length. So that's very big, okay? Do it yourself. See how big that is. It was very close to them, okay? She says that this is the only video that says this, by the way. She says it was observed by a dozen additional people. And that it was on 2 Air Force stations' radars. They said it was not a blimp, it was a bona fide sighting, meaning it was a legitimate sighting, according to this video and Kathleen Martin. Barney saw figures in black shiny uniforms in the window of the craft. He described them as somehow not human, and he felt like he was going to be captured like a bug in a net. He ran from the field that he was looking through his binoculars at this craft, and he ran back to the car and started driving away, but the craft was moving over top of the vehicle. It was following them and then got directly above them. He told Betty to roll down the window, and she did. She expected to see lights when she looked up at it, but there was no lights, which really surprised her. It was also a pretty bright night out. The moon was about 3/4 full, so that's another reason why she was kind of surprised just to see blackness when she looked up out the window. So she rolled the window back up, and then the car started to vibrate. They heard buzzing sounds hitting the trunk of the car, and then suddenly they were in a new location about 35 miles down the road. They remembered very little. They remember that there was a roadblock of some sort, and there was a fiery orb that was moving, but they were not. I'm not quite sure what they're referring to there. Probably the UFO they saw. Then they drove home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and when they got home, they noticed Betty's dress was torn in several spots. The stitching at the top was torn. There was a tear from waist to hemline, and a hemline was torn down one side. The zipper on the dress was broken. There's a 2-inch tear in the zipper fabric. Barney's shoes were extremely scraped up, so much so that he threw them away and had to get new shoes. Betty folded the dress up, put it in the closet, and the next time she took it out, it was covered in a pink powdery substance. I believe this is the only video that says that Betty put this dress in a closet, and then when she took it out the next time, it was covered in this pink powder substance. So the dress was originally blue, and not the whole thing was covered in the pink powder, just most of it. And this dress was analyzed in 5 different scientific labs as of 3 years ago, and I'm pretty sure as of today. They found proteins and oils that were not Betty's on the dress. They were not able to determine if it was of this planet or not. Certainly some of the bacteria on this dress was of this planet, like dirt and just regular Earth bacteria, because it's a dress on Earth and Betty was wearing it on Earth. But yeah, Betty also said that where the pink powder was actually where the ETs were touching her once she went to hypnosis therapy and remembered more of this incident. So that is all the notes I took from that first video, and we are going to get into the second video. Alright, the second video we are going to be talking about is by the New York Post, episode 11, The Basement Office, Alien Abduction, Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, and more. So the beginning part of this video is on the Betty and Barney Hill incident. This video isn't even in my top 3 favorite ones that I'm going to be talking about today, but I do really like this video. There was much more information in this video than the previous one. But yeah, there's just other great ones too. We are going to get into it. So Kathleen Martin is in most of this video on a video chat with them. Not all of it, but most of it. So she is giving a lot of information in this video too, and that's why I really like it. And this video actually says the date that this happened, as all videos on this subject should. So September 19th, 1961. Betty and Barney Hill are driving back home at night. They see a light in the sky, which seems to be following them. They had a period of missing time. They started having flashbacks and dreams. They ended up meeting with Dr. Benjamin Simon, a hypnotic regression therapist, and they remembered that they were actually taken on board. So, Betty had called her sister once her and Barney got home and kind of were trying to piece this together, and Betty's niece, Kathleen Martin, who was 13 at the time, was in the room when her aunt called her mom. So during the call, they were talking about a close encounter with a craft and how Barney had actually seen figures in the window, how 35 miles went by instantly, how Barney's shoes were scuffed and Betty's dress was torn, and the watches they were wearing that night stopped running and never ran again. So they reported this to an Air Force base, and they confirmed that they picked it up on radar, but in this video it says that there was a weak signal. Kathleen Martin was not there during this part of the video. So on an actual report, you can find this on Google, it says Barney's honesty and sincerity appear to be valid. Betty had had a series of dreams that started 10 days after the event and would happen in the early morning. This is what Kathleen Martin had to say about it. Just as she was waking up, she would get these dreams. And if you know anything about spirituality on a side note, when you first wake up, this is a very powerful time. Anyways, Barney had very bad PTSD, high blood pressure, bleeding ulcers, couldn't sleep, and he ended up taking a leave of absence from work. So in 1964, hypnosis therapy starts. So Betty says, "I don't know where we are. I don't even know how we got here." Barney says, "They took me and carried me up this ramp. God, I'm scared. Betty says, they're taking me up to the object. I don't want to go on it. I don't want to. I don't know what's going to happen. If I go on it, I don't want to go. And after several hypnosis sessions, they both clearly remembered having their car halted by men standing in the road, and Barney realized they were the same men that he had seen in the craft. So Betty opened her car door when there was kind of a roadblock of men, and she wanted to run into the woods and hide, but they got her before she could. Barney opened his door, just kind of not willingly, but he knew he didn't have a chance of running. He just stepped out and was immediately taken. They were escorted on a path that led to a small clearing in the woods where the craft was. So Betty fought, and that's how her dress was torn. Barney could feel his shoes bumping along the rocks, just kind of like he was limp, and that's how his shoes were all scratched up. They were taken to separate exam rooms, and the ETs were interested in their skeletal and nervous system, their skin, inside their mouths and ears. Skin and hair samples were taken, and Betty says, he sticks the needle into my navel, and I'm crying, and I tell him, it's hurting, it's hurting, it's hurting, it's hurting, take it out. Barney says, Betty, we've got to get away, Betty. Heavy stuff. So that was all things that they have uncovered in hypnosis therapy. And this video also says how there is a historical site sign where this took place in New Hampshire, which I think that is really cool. Whether you believe their story or not, this is a part of history. Yeah. Alright, the next video I'm going to be talking about is by BuzzFeed, Unsolved Network, the alien abduction of Barney and Betty Hill. Was it aliens or false memory effect? So this is honestly my least favorite of the 6 videos, but it has information that no other videos have, and more information than the previous 2 videos I talked about. The thing I do really like about this video is the fact that there are 2 BuzzFeed people there kind of reacting to this other person telling them the story. So let's get into it. Betty went to the University of New Hampshire. She was a social worker. Barney was a postman. They were both NAACP members and members of their local Unitarian church. Barney was also on the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, and on the night of September 19th, 1961, they were driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire back home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and at 10 p.m. they stopped for coffee, on pace to arrive home at 3 a.m. And when they got back on the road, they saw lights approach them in the sky. They got larger and larger, and Betty noticed how it was following them. So she asked Barney to pull over to get a look, and he stepped out with binoculars. They saw a spacecraft land in a field. This is the only video that says that, and 5 hominoid beings in it. They raced back to their car and tried to get back on the highway, but they heard odd beeps and felt an odd tingling drowsiness come over them. They regained consciousness 2 hours later, 35 miles down the road. So they had 2 hours of missing time. Betty's dress was torn and stained, Barney's shoes were scuffed up, the binocular strap was broken, and there were shiny circles on the trunk of their car, where they heard these beeps and weird noises hitting it. So in the years after, they couldn't shake the feeling that something bad had happened to them. Betty had nightmares, and Barney had the feelings of a person who saw something he doesn't want to remember. He also had a habit of checking his body for clues. Benjamin Simon gave them hypnosis therapy, and they both reported short beings with gray skin. Barney said they were somehow not human and dressed in shiny black uniforms. There was 6 to 11 of them. The beings took them from their car onto the ship for separate medical exams. Betty remembered a long needle being inserted into her belly button. This video also says how there were already headlines before this happened, like, "Did they seize couple?" and "I was quizzed on a spaceship." But Betty and Barney's story was the first to get major attention because it has so much evidence. And in 1966, only 7% of Americans believed in aliens and UFOs, and only 20 years later, so in 1986, 43% of Americans believed, which is pretty darn cool. Alright, the next video we're going to be talking about is by Showmax. It's called Project Blue Book Declassified, the True Story of the Hill Abduction. So this video is not in my top 3 favorites out of the 6 just because it's so short. It's, I believe, less than 5 minutes long, but I do really like it because there is actually a clip of Betty Hill talking and Barney's voice. So let's get into it. On September 19th, 1961, it was the first well-publicized alien abduction. Betty sees lights while they are driving home. The light stops midair directly in front of us. The car overstalled, and at that point I realized they undoubtedly planned to take us on board, says Betty. Next thing they realized is they are 35 miles down the road and that they were missing 2 hours of time. Barney says, "My wife decided, well, we should notify someone, and we thought of notifying the military base located in this area." A radar had detected something unidentified at 2:14 a.m., and Betty says that is just about the time we estimate that the UFO left. So Betty has nightmares, and they decide to go to hypnosis regression therapy. Barney says, "Is he a captain? What is he?" And Dr. Benjamin Simon says, "You're still asleep, but you can see it all clearly." Barney says, "It's like a big pancake with windows, and we gotta get away, Betty." So that is all the notes I took for that video. Moving on to the next one. Alright guys, now my son is with me because he woke up, but we are going to be talking about this next video by the Lights Out podcast called Barney and Betty Hill, an Alien Abduction Story. Now this one is the longest out of the 6 videos, and it's my favorite, okay, because it is definitely the most detailed. So let's get into it. Barney was born July 20th, 1922 in Virginia. He was in the U.S. Army. He attended Temple University. He married a lady named Ruby. They had 2 kids, got divorced, and then he met Betty Barrett, who was born on June 28th, 1919 in New Hampshire. She attended the University of New Hampshire for social sciences and then became a child welfare social worker. Barney was a postman and a member of the local Civil Rights Commission. He was actually honored for his outstanding service to the community by the governor of New Hampshire and got invited to the inauguration of Lyndon Johnson in 1963. Betty and Barney were both NAACP members, and when this incident took place, Barney was 39 and Betty was 41. They were driving home from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and at 10:30 p.m. they were in Indian Head, New Hampshire. So Betty was supposedly already interested in UFOs and aliens and all that because, like another video said, there had already been some stories on abduction before that were not widely publicized at all, and there had actually been alien movies and TV shows already out. Anyways, at 10:30, they see a light in the sky. Really, Betty is the one to have seen it first, from my research at least. So this light starts moving, and she at first wonders if it was a planet or a star, and then it moves closer, bigger, and gets brighter, and She then thinks maybe it's an airplane, but then it kept disappearing and reappearing, so she pretty much came to the conclusion that it must be a UFO. And she tells Barney to pull over and look at it. This is the only video that says that their dog Delcy was with them. So Betty takes Delcy for a walk, and Barney is looking through his binoculars at this craft, and he saw figures in it. So they get back in the car, and they drive away down this isolated road while the UFO follows them. So they saw the UFO hovering over Cannon Mountain, over a restaurant, and a tall signal tower. This craft was over 40 feet long because it was hovering over a particular cliff for a while, and they measured the cliff. The lights then started shining super bright on the car, and Barney was not able to see while he was driving, so he slams on the brakes, and it hovers over the car, which was a 1957 Chevy Bel Air. Barney then, this is the only video that says this, he hops out and grabs his pistol and points it at the craft. He sees 8 to 11 hominoid figures wearing glossy black uniforms and capes looking at them. Well, at him, really. All but one move over to this control panel, and the one that they later call the leader says, "Stay where you are." The UFO opens up, and this is about 50 to 80 feet above Barney and 300 feet away from Barney. And he tells Walter Webb, who is a member of the NIC, the National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, that they were not human at all. They get back in the car, drive away, and Betty looks out the window at it. They then heard rhythmic beeping and felt a tingling sensation come over them. They realized they had traveled 35 miles and can't remember the last 2 hours. They arrived home at 5 a.m. and had lots of weird feelings. They felt like their luggage was somehow contaminated, so they left it outside on the porch. They realized that the watches they were wearing no longer worked, and that the clocks in their home didn't work either. The binocular strap was torn, Barney's nice dress shoes were all scraped up, and they both took very long showers. Barney even felt the need to examine his genitals. Barney and Betty both tried sketching the craft and talking about it a lot after their long showers. Betty then noticed that her dress was torn and that her earrings were missing that she was wearing. Powder was found on the dress, and to this day it has been tested in 5 different scientific laboratories. This video claims that it was not of organic origin and that it also had high UV exposure levels. There was also multiple shiny circles found on the trunk of their car where it sounded like the sound had been hitting. Betty decided to call her sister Janet, and this wasn't the first time that someone in their family had claimed to see a UFO. Janet said that she saw one in 1957. Janet also said to call the Peace Air Force Base, which was their local Air Force base, so Betty did on September 21st, 1961. She spoke to an investigator, and the next day, Major Paul Henderson called her as well. She told Henderson about seeing the craft, but not how Barney had seen figures in it, because Barney was originally very against reporting this incident at all. Henderson said that it was picked up on radar, and he waited a couple days to file his report. The report was not filed until September 26, 1961. The report claims that Betty and Barney most likely misidentified the planet Jupiter. Janet came over and she saw the marks on the trunk of their car. She suggested to put a compass by it, and when they did this, the compass just kept spinning. Betty started researching more about UFOs. She checked out a book at the library called The Flying Saucers Are Real, And also on September 26th, the same day that the report was filed by Henderson, Betty wrote the author of this book, Donald Quito, who then forwarded the letter to Walter Webb. Walter Webb ended up interviewing them about the beings as well. Barney said that he felt like he had a mental barrier blocking his memory. Walter even said that he believed their story. 10 days after the incident, Betty had dreams for 5 nights. This is what this video said. In a row of being taken from the car to the ship and having experiments done on them. In November of 1961, she started writing these dreams down, and according to these dreams, there was a roadblock of men. 2 men took her through the woods. They were about 5 feet 4 inches tall. She tried screaming to Barney, but he was in some form of trance, and he wasn't responding. They were then taken onto a ship, taken to separate exam rooms, and in Betty's exam room, there was the one she called the examiner and one she called the leader. She said that the examiner had a calm demeanor about him, and Betty was placed on a table with a bright light above her. The examiner cut off some of her hair, examined her hands, arms, legs, eyes, ears, mouth, teeth, and throat. He even saved trimmings of her fingernails. He took a skin scraping and inserted a needle into her belly button to check her nervous system. It hurt really bad, and the leader waved his hand in front of her, and then the pain stopped. The examiner left the room when he was done examining, and the leader stayed, so Betty sparked up a conversation with the leader. He handed her a book with strange symbols on it and said that she could take it with her when she left. She asked where they came from, and he pointed it out on a holographic map to her. Barney and her were escorted out, and then an argument broke out amongst the aliens. The leader then told Betty that she could not keep the book because the other aliens did not want her to remember the encounter. They were then escorted to their car, and the leader told them to wait to drive away until the craft departed. Mind you, that was all a dream. So on November 25th, 1961, they were interviewed by Nightcap members Robert Holman and Stevie Jackson. They told them about their encounter, and investigators said that their drive home should have taken 4 hours, but it took them 7. They suggested hypnosis therapy, and Barney was very against it, but he then agreed if it would help stop Betty's nightmares. They tried everything to stop these nightmares. They even drove back to the site where this happened in the White Mountains to see if it would spark up any memories, but it did not. And then on November 23rd, 1962, when they were in church, the guest speaker was Captain Ben Sweat, an Air Force member, and he was talking about his interest in hypnosis. So after the service, Betty and Barney talked to him, and Captain Sweat was very interested in their missing time and their experience. He said that he wasn't qualified to hypnotize them, but he referred them to Mr. Stevens, who then referred them to Benjamin Simon, a Boston psychologist and neurologist. In Dr. Simon's preliminary diagnosis, he said they had extreme anxiety, and he agreed to do regressive hypnosis therapy on them. January 4th, 1964, hypnosis started, and it lasted until June 6th, 1964. So Barney usually went first in these sessions, and then Betty did. Barney discovered that he had kept his eyes closed during most of this encounter because he was so scared, and his binocular strap had been torn by running to the car from the field. He ran to the car and drove as fast as he could, then felt oddly compelled to drive into the woods. There were 6 men standing in the dirt road that he had been driving on, and then the car stalled. 3 men approached the car and said not to be afraid of them. The one they call the leader told him to close his eyes, and Barney said he felt like his eyes had been pushed into his eyes. Barney was then taken onto the ship into a separate exam room from Betty and told to lie down on a rectangular exam table. A cup-like device was placed on his genitals, and he did not remember having an orgasm but recalled them taking a semen sample. They scraped his skin, looked in his ears and mouth, and inserted a tube into his anal cavity that was quickly removed. They examined his spine with a tool and counted his vertebrae. He heard them speaking in a mumbled language that he couldn't understand. Betty had said that they spoke English, but they weren't good at it. Barney said that they spoke some English, but he heard very little because they were hard to understand. He said that they communicated telepathically because there was no mouth movement. Barney remembers being escorted back to the car and watching the ship take off. So, the differences from Betty's dreams and the regressions were that the technology of the ship was different, their catch and release, if you will, was different, and the aliens had a very different appearance. Also, the order of events was different. But in the regressions, Barney and Betty both had extremely similar experiences, and these experiences are published in many books like The Interrupted Journey. So Betty saw this 3D holographic star map, which I think is the most interesting thing about this story. She sketched this map in hypnosis regression therapy in 1964. She said that the solid lines were trade routes in places that they went frequently. The dotted lines were to less traveled to star locations. And Marjorie Fisher in 1968 saw Betty's star map, and she began trying to match this to a star system. The next and final video that we're going to talk about is going to explain this a lot more, but anyways, she ultimately determined that it must be the Zeta Articuli star system. So after this event that happened in 1961, Betty claimed to have seen UFOs a few times after. Barney ended up passing away of a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 46 on February 23, 1969, and then Betty died of cancer on October 17, 2004. So that is all the information I got from that video, my favorite video, and now we are going to get into the final video, which is my second favorite. It's by various artists called The Betty and Barney Hill Abduction. Alright, so it says, like the last one, that Betty said about the star map that the heavy lines were places they went to frequently and they were trade routes, the dotted lines were places they went to less frequently, and that our sun was one of the less frequent traveled to stars. So she drew this in 1964, and then in 1969, 5 years later, was when these background stars were actually discovered and published. So this is proof that she could not have just drawn this from a picture that she found, because they weren't discovered until after she drew this model. Therefore, she must have got this information from somewhere. Alright, so Marjorie Fisher saw this in 1968, and she had been making models trying to figure this out and couldn't quite pin it until these background stars were published in 1969, and I just think that is so amazing. So that is all for this video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed. Love and light, and the hybrid children are coming soon.